Canada is seen as being one of the most welcoming countries in the world. But let's be honest, what Canada really has is an immigration system spinning out of control, and the cracks are showing everywhere. Housing is unaffordable, jobs are harder to find, education is being cheapened, and yet the government keeps opening the floodgates. This isn't multicultural harmony, it's a slow burn crisis that Ottawa pretends doesn't exist. To understand how we got here, you need to go back a bit. Indian immigration to Canada isn't new. It started in small waves over a century ago, but it took off after World War II. Canada was part of the British Commonwealth, and that connection gave Indians easier entry compared to other nationalities. In 1967, Canada introduced a new points-based immigration system that emphasized education and skills instead of race or nationality. On paper, it was meant to be fair. In reality, it opened the door wide for mass immigration from India. Fast forward to today. As of 2025, nearly 3 million Indian immigrants live in Canada. That's about 7 to 8% of the entire population, a massive share for one group alone. And remember, that's the official number. If you include undocumented migrants, the real figure is probably much higher. And because most newcomers settle in just a handful of cities, the concentration feels overwhelming. Take Brampton, Ontario, for example. Roughly 27% of Brampton's population is Indian. That's not diversity anymore, that's dominance. You could honestly rename the place New Delhi or Little Punjab and no one would blink. This kind of clustering puts enormous pressure on local services, infrastructure, and housing. And yet, instead of asking whether the system can handle this scale of migration, Canadian politicians just pat themselves on the back and call it progress. Full speed ahead. It wouldn't surprise me if we soon start to see Canadian trains chock full of Indians holding onto the outside and sitting on top of it, like we see back in India. That's another thing to mention, the lack of civic sense. Basic things like not littering on the streets, not talking loud enough to drown out the voice of others around you, not taking off your sandals and resting your bare feet on public transport, not eating curry on public transport, not using the beach as a toilet. When these things happen once or twice, most people would brush it off as a rare occurrence. But when it happens multiple times over 3 million people in a country of 40 million people, yeah, I'm not surprised that Canadians are sick and tired. Let's address one of the biggest loopholes feeding this system, the so-called student visa program. In theory, it's about giving international students a chance to study in Canada. In practice, it has turned into a pipeline for cheap labor and permanent residency. All across the country, random colleges have popped up that exist solely to cater to Indian students. They're often in strip malls, tiny office spaces, or rented classrooms with barely any staff. Let's not kid ourselves. These aren't Harvard or Oxford. They're glorified degree mills pumping out diplomas like they're handing out fast food coupons. They're cheap and usually have names that sound similar to prestigious universities. And why does this matter? Because when tens of thousands of students come in every year, they aren't just studying, they're working. They're driving up demand for low-skilled jobs. They're crowding into rental housing, and they're undercutting wages because they'll accept lower pay just to survive and send money back home. For ordinary Canadians, that means fewer jobs, higher rent, and a labor market tilted against them. But hey, at least the local strip mall college made a profit, right? Education itself is being watered down too. When a Canadian kid spends years grinding through school, aiming for a respected degree, it loses meaning when colleges are churning out thousands of easy diplomas for anyone who can pay tuition. Canada's reputation for quality education is at risk of becoming a punchline, and all because the government won't clamp down on the scammy institutions gaming the system. Then, there's the impact on housing. This one's impossible to ignore. Canada already has one of the worst housing crises in the developed world. Prices in Toronto and Vancouver are so out of reach they may as well be selling houses on Mars. Add millions of newcomers into the mix, many of them crammed into the same cities. And you get sky-high rents, bidding wars, and entire neighborhoods transformed overnight. Regular Canadians can't compete. Young families are priced out before they even start. But politicians keep dodging the obvious. You can't keep bringing in hundreds of thousands of people every year without building enough homes for them. And don't think this is just about housing or jobs. There are bigger issues at play. When immigration is managed this poorly, tensions rise. Canadians feel like strangers in their own cities. Festivals, languages, and customs clash, not because people hate diversity, but because it's happening at a scale the country can't absorb. Integration is supposed to be about balance. Instead, Canada is creating parallel societies, where newcomers live almost entirely among themselves, with little incentive to adapt. That isn't multiculturalism, it's fragmentation. Security concerns are rising too. When immigration is rushed and numbers are this high, vetting becomes sloppy. Law enforcement has flagged issues with student visa fraud, human trafficking, and even criminal networks exploiting the system. For every hardworking student who just wants a better life, there's someone else using the chaos to game the system. And when Ottawa looks the other way, Canadians pay the price. Let's also talk about political capture. Large immigrant communities become voting blocs, and politicians are addicted to pandering. Brampton is a textbook case. Instead of asking tough questions about whether the system is sustainable, local and federal leaders fall over themselves to keep the immigrant vote happy. It's not about what's best for Canada, it's about who can get elected next year. And so the cycle continues. More visas, more students, more pressure on housing and jobs. Meanwhile, average Canadians are told to shut up and stop complaining or risk being labeled intolerant or racist. This is the core problem. Canadians are being gaslit by their own government. You're told immigration is the reason the economy grows, but your paycheck hasn't budged. You're told newcomers fill labor shortages, but you can't find a job yourself. You're told multiculturalism is a success, but your rent just doubled. Your kid's school is overcrowded, and you feel like your city has changed beyond recognition. So here's the blunt truth. The issue isn't individual immigrants trying to build a better life. The issue is a Canadian system that has turned immigration into a business, not a nation-building tool. Colleges get fat tuition checks, employers get cheap labor, politicians get votes, and ordinary Canadians get stuck with the bill in higher costs, weaker education, job insecurity, and social division. So the next time someone says Canada needs more immigration, maybe ask more for who, because for a lot of Canadians it feels less like an opportunity and more like a raw deal. Canada has always prided itself on being welcoming, but there's a fine line between welcoming and being taken advantage of. Right now, that line has been erased. If Canada doesn't get serious about fixing its immigration system, cutting out the shady student mills, slowing down intake to match housing and jobs, and actually enforcing integration, then the problems we're seeing now are just the beginning. Canada is at a crossroads. It can either keep papering over the cracks while pretending everything is fine, or it can finally admit the system is broken and put Canadians first. And if the politicians won't do it, then it's up to ordinary people to demand it. Because at the end of the day, no amount of slogans about diversity will fix an economy and society stretched past its breaking point.